Hi all. There is a number of things I want to address in this video, but the underlying theme, I'll just go straight to it, is what I see as a massive hypocrisy coming from the right in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. Now I've touched on this before, but there's been new developments since my last video. I will be talking about Trump's second state visit and some of the things that have come out today from the press conference and so on. But I think this is a major issue, so I want to address it now. Regarding free speech, there's a lot of things going on, so bear with me. I'll address the big one, the one that's kind of getting the most traction, and that is the Jimmy Kimmel show has been pulled by ABC. And it appears that ABC has caved into, just in a few notes here, the Federal Communication Commission, which is headed by Brendan Carr, who's appointed by President Trump. Brendan Carr has said he's going to go after what he sees as media bias. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought, okay, maybe Kimmel told some tasteless joke. His show has had controversies before. I thought maybe he told some joke in bad taste or something. And even then, censorship would be questionable. But what he done was he questioned the motivation of the shooter and he suggested MAGA links to the shooter. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what Jimmy Kimmel said. I didn't see that directly, by the way, but probably won't now because it's been scrapped. But on this, I really take this line on free speech. Unless someone is directly inciting violence or spreading false accusations against an individual, not a movement, it's not the same thing, against an individual, i.e., in terms of a criminal case, like if you falsely accuse someone of a crime they haven't committed, that's a serious matter. But other than that, I think free speech should be pretty broad ranging. And the irony here could not be stronger. The right are constantly railing about cancel culture and about how the left are supposedly so censorious. Now, I don't say the left are perfect in this regard at all. I do think the left have been guilty of censorious attitudes at times. I do think that the left have also been guilty of hypocrisy. So none of this is to exonerate the left. But it does matter because I think what the MAGA movement is doing is shamelessly exploiting this young man's death to basically silence dissent. And we're seeing lots of examples of it. Right now, the two of the most powerful men in America, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and J.D. Vance, the Vice President, are taking active measures to try and silence dissent. Rubio has suggested that the State Department will cancel visas for anyone thought to be celebrating Kirk's death. But how do you define celebrating versus simply criticising it? I mean, some of what's been called celebrating, I would say, is more accurately described as just a criticism of Charlie Kirk. So how does Rubio justify this crackdown on free speech? And Vance, who is biased because he was a friend of Kirk, is saying, and I'll just get this directly, he stood in on Charlie Kirk's show, I should say. He is in the United States now, well thought of Trump is here. There's reports on the BBC by Nadine Youssef. People who celebrate the killing of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk should be held accountable, US Vice President J.D. Vance has said. Call them out and hell, call their employer. Vance said as the guest hosted an episode of the Charlie Kirk show. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility. Pilots, medical professionals, teachers, one Secret Service employee are among those who have been suspended or sacked for social media posts that were deemed inappropriate after Kirk's death. Critics have argued the firings threaten free speech and employee protections, although US companies have wide latitude to terminate employees. But regardless of the flexibility they may have, think of the implications here. You have the Vice President of the United States, a man who's one heartbeat away from the presidency, effectively saying, censor those who criticise a conservative activist. Why? Because he happened to die young in a violent death. As an example of this sort of right-wing hysteria that we're seeing, the actress Amanda Seyfried has come under heat. And again, what did she actually say? This is from The Independent. The reports by Kevin E. G. Perry. Amanda Seyfried has addressed the controversy surrounding a remark she made about Charlie Kirk after he was shot dead. Kirk was killed last week at the age of 31 during a speaking engagement for his American comeback tour at Utah Valley University. In an Instagram comment shortly afterwards, Seyfried described Kirk as hateful. The 39-year-old Mamma Mia actor received a backlash on social media and responded Wednesday with a post on her Instagram stories. "We're forgetting the nuance of humanity," she wrote. "I can get angry about misogyny and racist rhetoric and also block capitals. Very much against, agree, I think that's a typo, that Charlie Kirk's murder was absolutely disturbing and deplorable in every way imaginable." She continued, "No one should have to experience this level of violence. This country is grieving too many senseless and violent deaths and shootings. Can we agree on that at least?" Now, to me, it's crystal clear that she is condemning his death. And what she's arguing is it's very compatible to dislike the man, to dislike his views, to criticise his views, but also agree that murdering a man in cold blood is an awful thing. And what we're seeing from the MAGA movement here is a sinister attempt to exploit Kirk's death to absolutely silence critics. Some people have called it McCarthyism, like contemporary McCarthyism, and I'm inclined to agree with that. It's like, let's find the lefties. Kirk's friends have really been on the warpath. They want to go after leftists in general. So there's very serious implications here, and it's glaringly obvious to me the right-wingers, specifically the MAGA movement, are exploiting his death. They're exploiting his death to try and silence dissent. Now, I've pointed out the hypocrisy before of their attitude to violence. Like I say, when Paul Pelosi was violently attacked, now he didn't die, but we're talking about an 82-year-old man who was left in an ICU. As he was lying in that ICU, the son of the president, Donald Trump Jr., thought it would be appropriate to post a sick joke. He had this kind of apparatus kit. Supposedly it was a Halloween costume. But that was in clear reference to the attack on Pelosi. Trump himself gave a pretty tasteless statement on Nancy Pelosi's security. MAGA, I feel, is devoid of moral integrity. I just think they are power for power's sake. They are institutionally dishonest. I mean, the MAGA world is black equals white, night equals day, red equals blue. The sheer depth of dishonesty is staggering. And I'll go back to something Vance said. We're against political violence, but we believe in civility. We're against political violence? He's part of an administration that pardoned the violent January 6th insurrectionists. Violent thugs who attacked the US Capitol, who were trying to kill politicians, who injured 200 police officers and one died. And Vance has arrogance to say we're against political violence? In some ways, I wonder, is Vance... I don't really think that Vance necessarily poses the same threat as Trump, because he doesn't have the same cult following. But what I'm acutely aware of is he's only 41 years old. He's a year older than myself, 42. He's the Vice President of the United States. I don't think Trump's health is as great as people claim. His speech today, he was mixing up countries yet again. He's a 79-year-old man. I'm not sure that his health is as great as he claims. So let's say something happened and Trump was incapacitated, like he had a stroke or something. Who knows? Vance becomes president. J.D. Vance has went from ostensibly being a Trump critic to being a real MAGA blowhard. But the cognitive dishonesty that J.D. Vance comes out with, the absolute hypocrisy that he thought he could come to the UK and lecture the UK and other European countries on free speech, whilst he is now actively going after anyone who disagrees with Charlie Kirk. I don't really buy this line, it's just reserved for people who are celebrating Kirk's death. I honestly haven't seen many people actually celebrating it. I have seen people criticise Kirk, and that's totally legitimate. Kirk did have some extreme views. He had anti-Semitic positions. He had reckless views on vaccines. He had extremely reckless views on gun violence. He literally said that gun violence is a price to pay for the Second Amendment. So in Charlie Kirk's worldview, having American students gunned down in schools, oh well, it's unfortunate, but it's a price we have to pay. That to me is utterly reckless and callous. Whether or not he was a misogynist and a racist, I don't know enough about him to say that, but the idea that he was a great guy, he was down to earth, he was a moderate, nice bloke is just rubbish. Some of the things that he came out with really were questionable. Now, one of the things the supporters keep citing is the fact that he engaged in open debate and he was all for free speech. Well, it's true that he famously would put himself up for debate and he'd have this thing like, prove me wrong. But, you know, who was he going up against? He was going up against college students who were about a decade younger than himself, probably, in all honesty, a little bit intimidated. I mean, Charlie Kirk was a famous national figure, right? It is a little bit intimidating going up against someone who's a prominent figure. It takes quite a bit of self-confidence. I have no doubt Kirk was pretty smart. You know, he was smart enough to argue his corner. He was smart enough to build up a successful movement at the age of just 31. So I think he was a smart guy. But this, you know, they point to that as being, oh, well, that proves he was a moderate. Not really. It just proves he had a lot of self-confidence. As the Times Registry put it, you know, he wasn't interested in these sort of Socratic debates, which was exchanging of ideas and just seeking the truth. Charlie Kirk was an extreme partisan. You know, he was extremely pro-MAGA. He went into those debates to try and, humiliate those who were arguing with him. He went into them to push a MAGA agenda. He wasn't going in with an open mind and thinking, oh, maybe the other person has a valid point of view. And yes, he would let them speak, but for the most part, apparently on the day he died, he kind of dismissed actually the last question that was asked of him, but I won't dwell too much on that. I think something very dangerous is going on. This young man's death is being exploited and manipulated by the MAGA right as an opportunity for them to swoop in and silence dissent. I think the Trump administration has been trying this for a long time, but I think they're taking advantage of this, unfortunately. I mean, Trump from the UK today was gloating about Jimmy Kimmel taking off air, and Trump claims it's to do with ratings. Trump knows damn well it's a censorship campaign. I mean, let's be clear, Jimmy Kimmel offered an opinion. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that opinion. What we know about the gunman so far is he came from a Republican family, but he had material that purportedly was anti-fascist. So, you know, he may have been from a Republican family and he himself could have been hard left. Who knows? There's a lot of things flying around about the shooter, but frankly, that's beside the point. The point here is that if MAGA Republicans truly believe in the First Amendment, then they should support Jimmy Kimmel's right to have an opinion. And you know what? They've got a right to disagree with him, to criticise him. But to actually take him off air, that's something else. I think we are seeing a McCarthyist sort of environment, because unless people, you know, just throw out discussion praise of Charlie Kirk, then they could well be targeted. It's a very dangerous situation. I want to go to the United States at some point in the future. So, you know, Marco Rubio, if you're watching, I am not celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. It's a terrible thing. It's a murder of a young man in public. It's an awful thing. But what we're seeing is censorship, and for Vance and other MAGA people to lecture the UK on this. And the sad thing is, there's a lot of people in Britain that blips up, but they turn a blind eye to the hypocrisy. I mean, they are this idea that they want Britain to become, you know, a MAGA type society. One lunatic actually said that we should allow Donald Trump to buy Britain, and I don't think he was even joking. It's pretty far down the pecking order. We're not talking about a politician here. It was just some reform voter, but I think some of them genuinely have that mindset. I think there's a thing in the MAGA movement which is right, might is right. It's this adulation of what's fundamentally a bully. Never forget that Donald Trump first came to fame by firing people. on the American version of The Apprentice. It was probably famous before that, but there's something fundamentally nasty about the MAGA movement. I mean, look at the way Trump describes things. A big, beautiful wall. Who describes something like that? And then you get MAGA people gloating outside refugee detention centres. As if that's some sort of holiday shot. It's disgusting. I find it utterly disgusting. I'll be talking about the state visit soon. Trump hasn't brought the free speech issue up as far as I can tell. If he did, I haven't watched the full developments today, but if he did, I hope Starmer spoke up and pushed back a little bit. I personally feel that our side has been far too placating of Trump. And yes, Trump issued warm words for the UK. I think he genuinely likes the UK, I will say that. I think Trump genuinely likes the UK because of his connection, the fact his mother was from Scotland. I think he genuinely likes the UK, but what we do not need is his brand of politics in this country. And we don't need his acolytes like Musk and others stirring up trouble in this country. I think Starmer needs to be a bit more outspoken. If Trump chirps up about free speech, Starmer should say something along the lines of, I believe in free speech, but this is an issue on both sides of the Atlantic, Mr. President. And frankly, maybe he should have the guts to just turn around and say, Mr. President, your own administration is cracking down on this. It's not going to happen. He won't say that. But I just think the arrogance of MAGA to point fingers at this country whilst they're actively trying to silence dissent is staggering. And for all those right-wingers out there who think that they have a monopoly on free speech, how do you answer to this? If you're not condemning what we're seeing, if you're not condemning this blatant attempt to censor critics of not just Charlie Kirk, but more broadly MAGA, then do not tell me that you're on the side of free speech. There's some pretty prominent people, and I'm not going to name names here, but certain people I can think of who have really jumped into bed with the MAGA movement, and they have railed against the intolerant left and the far left and all the rest of it. The difference is the far left aren't in power. I don't trust the far left. I don't like some of the things the far left come out with, but they're not the ones in power. They're not the ones using their power at that sort of national level, at the presidential level, to silence critics. I'm not naive. Of course there's a far left faction in America. There's aspects of the Democratic Party I do not like. I do not like the intolerant woke dogma that they've often come out with. I've been very clear about that. But let's be very, very clear what's happening here. They are exploiting Charlie Kirk's death to silence dissent. Incidentally, there was a pub in West London, Biddy Mulligan's pub, that was it. It was one of the Biddy Mulligan's, I believe, is a chain. But they actually had a Charlie Kirk free speech corner. Well, my question is, my thought is, surely that's as inappropriate as British left-wing activists putting up murals of George Floyd. Charlie Kirk was a populist right American influencer. The idea that he should be venerated in the UK, I do question. Also, I would question the landlords, where was your tributes to Melissa Hartman and her husband? The Democratic politician who was murdered in Minnesota. What we're seeing here from the right is a hysteria. And, they're calling this a debate forum. I mean, are they seriously, is that pub seriously going to welcome Charlie Kirk critics, for example? Or Trump critics to come in and just debate freely? I don't trust the landlord's agenda because he's made it clear that he has a political agenda. I think if you're running a business, it's not a very good idea to put out your politics in that way. Either side, I say the same for the left, because you're going to polarize potential customers. And I question the appropriateness of eulogizing an American influencer in a London pub. Doesn't really make much sense. And they speak about it in free speech grounds. Yeah, Charlie Kirk believed in free speech, but apparently his supporters don't, given that they're trying to silence his critics. I wonder what he himself would think of this. Would he support it? If he was really such a great guy that was for free speech, I would hope to think he didn't. He'd say, sure, criticise me. So ironically, they're not actually showing respect to Kirk's legacy if they believe that is his legacy, by doing the very thing they claim that he was against. But I honestly think they've been trying this for a while. I do believe that Trump envies dictators. I think he wants to be a dictator. But in the American system, there's still enough people out there who won't allow that to happen. But I do. I think that Trump has always had a soft spot for dictators. I think he sees it as a sort of appealing lifestyle. I'll never forget the time he stood beside Putin and denigrated his own security services and the American media. Final thing I'm going to say here, there will be some people who will absolutely lap up what MAGA is doing right now. I mean in the UK. And all I can say is, well, I don't know what to say. I put a comment on this one talking about the hypocrisy, and I got 234 dislikes to 35 likes. And I'm not bothered by it because I think what we're seeing is that Britain's Trump supporters, although they are a minority, they're a very vocal minority, and they tie in all these things together: Trump, Farage, Reform, Tommy Robinson, free speech, and they genuinely seem to think that Trump is the answer to the free world. I would say he's the exact opposite. Trump has empowered Putin. Trump is cracking down on dissent at home. Oh, by the way, Charlie Kirk was not a great lover of the United Kingdom. He says it's a pretty depressing place, and he looked down on this country. So for any Brits who are celebrating him, that's worth bearing in mind. I will say what I've said before. The murder of Charlie Kirk was wrong, but Charlie Kirk is not above criticism, and criticising him is absolutely a valid point of free speech. Anyone, jubilating on his death, I think that's in bad taste. Personally, I wouldn't do it, but even that is free speech, essentially. Vance can say those people can be criticised, but what he is doing is abusing his power as vice president to try and silence dissent. Go after their employers. And for Vance, Vance honestly sickens me, because for him to talk about we're against political violence when his boss exonerated the criminals of January the 6th. His boss is a criminal. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. So there's just so much going on right now that I've encompassed all of this in one video, but any one of these would probably deserve a video in its own right. But I just don't want to. I could not live in Trump's America right now. I think it's getting worse, and I think that when MAGA Republicans talk about freedom and talk about being on the side of civility and liberty, they really, their hypocrisy just needs to be thrown in their face, metaphorically speaking. I mean, the dishonesty, the cognitive dishonesty of the MAGA movement is industrial. And remember, they had the world's richest man to promote this dishonesty. Musk may be technically out of it now, but he's still very much part of that populist right worldview and the somewhat utterly false narratives that's coming out of it.